Hey guys, it's Yamakiller here, and I wanted to do a slightly different video here for you today. Usually I have some gameplay videos or there's such things, but I wanted to go over a deck tech today. I haven't made a YouTube video in a while, and I wanted to do a little bit different, see how things worked out. So today I'm going to be looking at red-green midrange in Modern. It's a deck I've been playing on and off for a bit now. After the companion change, making companions significantly worse. This deck at one point during the companion change had worked in Obosh and had only odd cards, but after the change, it made it so this deck was once again viable in its current form as it once was before the companion change, or before companions were introduced. I want to go over this in section by section of each card. As you can see, it's not shown by mana cost or a curve of some sort. I would rather want to go over each section of what each cards do and what the rules play in the deck. So I'm going to start off with the lands. You know, it's pretty straightforward. There's no utility lands really. It's just like 9 fetch lands, 4 red-green, shocks, a mountain to go fetch with your wooded foothills, and a bunch of forests. This will be a little bit more important as we go down the road, and I'll explain why once we get there. But right now, it's just a pretty standard mana base, just, you know, no utility lands, just fetches, basics, shocks, so on and so forth. Next, I want to go on to one of the most important parts of this deck, which is the mana acceleration. If you saw this deck in a curve, there's no really 2 drops in this deck. There's 2 scavenging uses, but besides that, there's 12 1-drops, 4 bolts, 4 Arborel, 4 Utopia Sprawls, and nearly every hand opener, unless you know a very specific matchup, you want to have Arborel or Utopia Sprawl in your opening hand. Without those, you're going to be drastically behind most other decks, and you're not going to be able to play your cards on curves you want to, because you really want to skip the 2-drop slot, as you don't really have many 2-drops. You really want to go from Arborel / Utopia Sprawl up to 3, where you have a lot of your heavy hitters. Next, I want to go over to the strictly value-based cards, and this is Bloodbraid Elf and Seasoned Pyromancer. Bloodbraid Elf is a strict 2-for-1 almost 100% of the time. As you cascade into some sort of spell, it's going to be relevant. Whether the 2-for-1 is going to be a good 2-for-1, sometimes you pillage a player that's on 7 lands off your Bloodbraid Elf, and it's not that great. But sometimes you go like Bloodbraid Elf into Seasoned Pyromancer, where you have no cards in hand, and you got to play a 3-2, a 2-2, and draw 2 cards all for 4 mana, which is a pretty powerful effect. The other card is Seasoned Pyromancer, which when you play it, you discard 2 cards. If they're spells, you get 1/1s, and if they're not, you just draw 2 cards. And if you don't have any cards, it's discard up to 2 cards. So as battlefield, discard 2, or it's not up to, but it's just discard 2 cards. If you don't have any cards to discard, it's just 3 mana, 2/2, draw 2 cards, which is pretty good. It's definitely better than Divination. And in the graveyard, 5 mana, make 2 1/1s, and exile it. So it's just a great value card, and it allows you to cycle and recycle your hands. So sometimes you have cards that aren't that great in the matchup. It allows you to play certain cards that are particularly narrow, and Seasoned Pyromancer allows you to turn them into 1/1s as well as draw some extra cards. This is the core value base of the deck, and it's really what you're looking to curve into, I would say, on 3 and 4, and more grindy matchups and controlling matchups like Bant Snow, Jund, and the Mirror and such. Next, we have our interaction-based spells, and interaction is somewhat loose in this case, as Magus of the Moon is interaction in the sense that if you're playing against big mana or greedy mana bases, it allows you to interact with them in a good way as well as applying pressure. You'll see sometimes Blood Moon in this deck rather than Magus of the Moon at certain times when you play Magus. Your opponents that are playing the big mana or decks that are able to interact with it that need their mana because they're 3 or 4 colors, they have Lightning Bolt or Path to Exile, and it makes it so Magus isn't so great. Where Blood Moon would be better, or they have Dismember in the case of Tron, or Beast Within, or Engineer Explosives or something like this, where Magus of the Moon is not necessarily as good as Blood Moon, but I believe right now you want to be aggressive with both the fact of turning everything into mountains, as well as being able to actually attack your opponent, as a Blood Moon is not necessarily going to be as effective in a Tron or Amulet Titan matchup where you actually need to kill your opponent and you can't give them infinite time. The next card is Pillage. This is just allows you to, sometimes you just get to go like Arborel for Utopia Sprawl and on the play and pillage their only land, and then you Bloodbraid Elf, and you're just like, they're on 1 mana and you're on 4, and it just puts you miles ahead. It also can destroy artifacts, which is really important when people play cards like Stoneforge Mystic, or they're playing things like Tron, where you get to sometimes go Utopia Sprawl and kill Expedition Map, or you get to kill an Oblivion Stone, or they played a Karn the Great Creator. There's just lots of different artifacts that are reasonable to kill right now, especially because of Karn the Great Creator making a resurgence in both Eldrazi Tron, Amulet Titan, regular Tron, and other such decks, usually where Pillage plays a dual role where if you draw it late, you can sometimes destroy an Ensnaring Bridge, or if you draw it early, you get to destroy their land. The final card is Lightning Bolt, pretty straightforward, deals 3 damage, can take down a Planeswalker, can take down a card like Devoted Druid, take down an Arbor Elf, can just take down basically any just threat that just deals 3 damage, or sometimes you just shoot them in the face for the last 3 points, and it's just really, really powerful. Any red deck is basically playing 4 bolts like 100% of the time. It's just a no-brainer to play. So this is the interaction, the pure basically interaction spells, and the next is our interaction slash value-based cards. We have 2 Chandra Torch Defiance. Now this card gets you card advantage, gets you mana advantage, is a removal spell, and a way to win the game with its ultimate. This card is incredibly powerful. Sometimes it doesn't quite line up well with what your opponent's doing, but I like it as a 2-of because drawing a second one of it usually isn't that powerful, but being able to curve out into this, like let's say Seasoned Pyromancer, make 2 1/1s, and then Chandra Torch of Defiance, it's heavily protected. You can kill their creature, you can start creating mana to go up to your other big spells, be able to play 2 spells at once, or you can +1, get card advantage. It just plays a lot of roles. But you can't play too many 4s and 5s in Modern because if you do that, you'll just get run over. So 2 is a pretty good slot here, especially because it's legendary. And next we've got 4 Glory Bringers. Now 4 seems like a lot for a 5-mana card that doesn't win the game on the spot, but you have a bunch of acceleration in the form of Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl, and Glory Bringer is a way that's both a removal spell and a way to win the game, as well as it has haste, so it can sometimes surprise your opponents. So Glorybringer is just like a very powerful top end to this deck. It provides a lot of, it provides a almost clear 2-for-1 against like any creature deck down the line, and like against most creature decks, it's very difficult for them to deal with it, and it's just a lot of great value in the sense that it's going to be able to kill a creature, or it's value in the sense that you just win the game very quickly because it's a 4/4 haste flyer. So it's just a very good card. I can see possibly going down on numbers if the metagame gets very aggressive and you don't necessarily have the time to play Glorybringer, but right now we've got a lot of Bant Snow, Jund, other random mid-range decks going around where Glorybringer does the job very well. And the final interaction slash creature type spell is Bonecrusher Giant. You want to have more than just 4 bolts in your deck as interaction to be able to kill creatures. Bonecrusher Giant both fulfills the role of, like in combo, where you don't need the 2 damage, just play a 4/3. It starts killing your opponent and clocks them very quickly. Or sometimes in more controlling matchups, you get a Stomp, let's say, a Teferi that minus, and then play a 4/3. It's a great value card that also plays the role of having more interaction for creatures in the creature-based matchups like Burn, Devoted Druid, Infect, and other such matchups like that. Finally, I wanted to talk about my graveyard slash value creatures as well, like Klithos. It is a 4/5 indestructible that is actually fairly easy to turn on with your double pips being Seasoned Pyromancer, Blood Braid Elf, Glorybringer, Chandra. You also have permanents like Utopia Sprawl and Arbor Elf that are going to stay around for a while that get Klithos turned on a lot more than you would think. And its passive ability, which is the most important, you can exile a card from any graveyard, and if it's a spell, it deals 2 damage to your opponent and you gain 2 life. And if it's a land, you just get to create green or red mana. It's incredibly powerful because if you play it early on against control, you just start paying them for 2 every single turn. If you play it against Burn, you get to gain 2 life every turn. And if you play it against graveyard decks, which is a little bit slow for that matchup, but you just started getting to interact with the graveyard, you can take out Urros, you can take out Prized Amalgams or Dredgers. It's just an all-around like good value card. And even though it's legendary and a 2-drop, you have Seasoned Pyromancers to ditch your extra copies of Klithos if it ends up being a problem stuck in your hand. And finally, Scavenging Ooze. This card I've been on and off for is like a 2-of, somewhere between 2, 4, 0. Depends on how relevant graveyard decks are. But at worst case scenario, you play this late and a lot of your creatures have died, you just get to make like a 6/6, gain 4 life. It's great against Burn, it's great against graveyard decks, and sometimes it's just really reasonable in a mid-range matchup where everyone's expended their resources. You play a Scavenging Ooze, eat everything up, they can't use a Kolaghan's command to get rid of it, / get a creature back, and it's just a great value creature to sometimes have in certain metagames. Right now I'm on 2, but I can see anywhere between 4 and 0 depending on how the metagame shakes out. Now this is the main deck. I've felt pretty confident in this. I know certain people have liked to play Pillage not necessarily in the main, or even necessarily in the side and play things like Hex Drinker or other cards, but right now I feel like this main deck is fairly solid. There are some things you can tweak about as I will talk in the future, but this is a really solid main deck I have for this. Now I want to move on to the sideboard. The sideboard definitely possibly could use some work, but I like the idea behind this sideboard. We've got 2 collector oofs. They're just like random not random graveyard, random artifact decks. Like you can play it against Eldrazi Tron, regular Tron. Sometimes the Thopter Foundry combo is around, or Urza, or some other decks where collector oof can get people along with Stoneforge Mystic. And it sometimes just gets to snipe an Astrolabe. And in certain matches where you just need to lower your curve and have a 2/2, like against Burn or something, you can just side some 2/2s for 2 into your deck, and it's not the worst possible. Next, we've got Cindervines. Cindervines is a great card against control and combo like Storm. And against control, you can just play it and they just take a bunch of damage. And you can snipe an Astrolabe sometimes when their mana base is rough. It's just an all-around great card at what it does. I've definitely played at times where it wasn't as relevant because there wasn't as much control or there wasn't as much combo / things to interact with, so I've taken it out. But right now I think it's fairly powerful, along with the advent of Bant Snow being one of the top decks. And along with Bant Snow being one of the top decks, we've got Boil and Choke right here. This is mainly for the control matchups where people are on a lot of islands because of Mystic Sanctuary. It just gets to interact with them pretty well. I could see moving up on more copies of Choke / Boil with the advent of Bant Snow becoming bigger. Now we've got our anti-aggro cards in Anger of the Gods, and our anti-burn cards / aggro cards in the form of Obstinate Baloth, Weather the Storm. These cards gain life, really great against Burn and Prowess. Anger of the Gods, good against Burn and Prowess, and other decks like Devoted Druid, where you just want to be sweeping the board and it gets to catch everything. Even though this is a nombo with the cards in your deck a lot of the time, usually you can set up situations where the Anger of the Gods gets to play out particularly well for you and not for your opponent. Finally, we've got our graveyard interaction cards, Grafdigger's Cage and Relic Progenitus, great against Uro, great against Dredge, Grafdigger's Cage, great against Neoform and Dredge and other decks like that. So I think all of this comes together to be a very cohesive deck. If you looked at this in paper versus a bunch of other decks in the format, it would seem not that great, but it actually plays a lot better than it would seem. Right after this, I'm going to go through, I'm going to play out 10 hands just in solitaire and show you guys what it looks like to be mulliganing with the deck in game ones and such when you're unknown, and to give you guys a better idea of how the deck plays out in the game plan. And we'll be moving to that right now. Okay guys, we're here for the mulligan decisions and how the deck generally plays out from its opening hands. I want to show you how my mulligan decisions are made and how I would sequence certain things. Now this is a pretty clear mulligan. You're on the play. You only have 2 mana worth here with Stomping Ground plus Utopia Sprawl. If this had 1 more land, it would be a Snap Keep, regardless of what card was missing. I mean, actually, if you still had the Utopia Sprawl, almost always you want to have a Mana Accelerant in your opening hand on 7s and 6s. On 5s, you can start changing those things. Or if you know a very specific matchup, or your hand is like Double Bolt, Bone Crusher Giant, Magus, or some very specific hand. But right now we want to mulligan this hand. Only has 1 Mana Accelerant, which is good usually to have, but we don't have our 3rd land drop, and if we miss our land, it's going to be pretty horrible for us. It's mulligan here. This hand looks particularly good. We've got Arbor Elf, Mana Accelerant, we've got Seasoned Pyromancer to clean up our hand if need be, and we've got 3 lands. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to keep, and we're going to discard Bloodbraid Elf. So what would happen, more than likely, we would draw our first card. We're going to act like Wooded Foothills isn't here because we would be on the play. Arbor Elf, go to our next turn. We would then play Seasoned Pyromancer. Depending on what our opponent did, we would change how we would do things here. But we would do this, Seasoned Pyro. Actually, we're going to act as if we hadn't seen the Pillage yet. So we'd be getting rid of both of these. And then we'd Bloodbraid Elf, and it would all be good. So that's how one of the hands plays out, and let's move on to the next one. Okay, we're here with hand 2. This hand, pretty poor. We don't have a red source. Arbor Elf is our only accelerant. And, you know, very expensive cards with Glorybringer and Chandra. So, and we're going to be playing as if we're in the blind, so this hand's not going to be working out too well. It's mulligan. This hand is another mulligan. We have 2 3-drops and a 5, but we're not really doing much. And if our opponent puts on any pressure, we kind of have to discard our spells to be able to do anything. So we're going to mulligan again. On 5, we're going to keep this hand. It's a little anemic because we're going to have to mulligan a couple cards, but I'm going to go with ditching both these lands. We're going to keep. We're going to act as if we didn't draw the Pillage, and we're going to draw that for our turn. Do this. Almost always with your Utopia Sprawls, you want to be naming red, and almost always you want to be fetching for a forest. But it's definitely dependent on the matchup. Depending on what our opponent's doing, we would be playing Arbor Elf or Pillage. It's definitely dependent because we don't know if they're on big mana, they'd be playing Pillage. Now we play Arbor Elf and Scatter Use to develop our Glorybringer for the next turn. And that's hand number 2. So this is going to be hand number 3, and I think I'm actually going to call it with just 3 hands. A lot of them are pretty similar in the sense that you just want Arbor Elf, Utopia Sprawl, and plus something to do. This hand is great on 7. We get to decide, depending on what our opponent's doing, we will either fetch Forest, Utopia Sprawl, or Bolt if they're on burn. Actually, if we're on the play, we're always going to Utopia Sprawl, fetch Forest, do Mountain, see what our opponent's doing. We can either decide to develop our Stomping Ground or leave up Bone Crusher / Lightning Bolt, and that's what we're going to do. So we'll leave up both of these, and it would end up being very good for us. Let's say we do this. What's this? Let's assume we're doing those on real creatures. Next turn, we get to develop our Bloodbraid Elf or Magus the Moon, depending on what deck they're on. We would usually want to be fetching a basic, but since this isn't a real game, I'm just kind of doing things willy-nilly. But you get the idea. The deck, sometimes you get to go 1-drop into like 1-2 or 1-drop into 3-drop. As you really want to be accelerating from your first play almost always, unless you've got multiple bolts or like Bolt Bone Crusher to interact with your opponent. So hopefully you get the idea of what hands and ranges of hands are keepable, and hopefully you can use that to your benefit in the next games. I wanted to conclude this deck tech with just saying that red-green mid-range I think is a very good choice for deck in Modern right now. I've played it reasonably a lot. I've gotten a lot of good finishes when I don't punt off. I've been punting a lot with this deck. It is a lot harder than it would seem, or at least for me. But hopefully you guys pick this up and see how it works out for you. I hope you guys like the deck tech, and if you really liked it, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, do all that good stuff, and catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/YamaKiller. You'll see that in the description below, and watch me play these games live with this deck, as I'm playing mostly every single day. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later.